Hello, it's David at DCES UK, and this is a quick-ish follow-up to my video from earlier this month where I compiled an electrical installation certificate for my AFDD installation using Tysoft's Easycert. Today I'm going to complete the Part P paperwork, and if the prospect of that doesn't get you juiced up around the trousers, then what kind of a weirdo are you? Mind you, I never did understand why anyone would watch electrician videos in the first place. You're all weirdos in my book, and I urge you to rethink your lives and unsubscribe from such poppycock immediately. He can go, he can go, he can go. Oh, this chav can definitely go. I probably ought to keep the boffin. Have you all gone? Yeah, I knew you three would still be watching, you usual suspects. Okay then, well, before I get onto the Part P, let's address some of the feedback from the last video, and I start with exciting news. Andy S points out that points served pissed off as part of an Easycert update on 19th of January, 12 days before I published my last video, and pretty much 4 years to the day since I first complained to Tysoft of its presence. Although Easycert on my ThinkPad was set to automatically search for updates when started, it hadn't picked it up, not even by the 11th of February when Andy S made me aware of it lurking on Tysoft's servers. So anyway, forcing an update does indeed now give me the option to expunge points served from here on. Begone, you cack column of uselessness! Pinned comment was awarded to West in the West, who made an excellent point that I really ought to have thought of myself, if indeed I put any thought into these presentations at all, that the two test button tick box columns on the current schedule of test results, which I argued only needs to be one column if the schedule is laid out to match what's physically present in each circuit way, don't even need to be there at all. When issuing an electrical certificate, they can only contain a tick if they're not applicable. So what's the point of having them? You can't issue a certificate for new work with a cross or a limitation in that box, and do we really need it to be there for EICRs? Whether an EIC or an EICR, all that's needed is a single box on the inspection schedule which says all test buttons confirmed as operational. And bingo bongo, two columns are reclaimed from the existing overcrowded schedule of test results. The installer or inspector takes responsibility for having checked all the test buttons, and time is saved by not having to state that for every individual device. On an inspection, if a test button fails to operate, then it gets coded as a C2, and the observations note which device was found to be defective. How is that not in Amendment 2? Fuck it, how is that not the default from 14th edition or whenever it was that voltage operated earth leakage circuit breakers started appearing with test buttons? Lee queried the BSEN number I entered for my ARC fault detection devices, as I'd logged them as 61009s rather than 62606, which is the British and European standard for AFDDs. My Wilex bad boys are 3-in-1 hybrids, with overcurrent, earth leakage and ARC fault protection, so more than one standard applies in this case. The overcurrent and earth leakage functions are covered under BSEN 61009, and as the schedule of test results is asking for the overcurrent standard to differentiate different types of breaker or fuse, then 61009 was correct for my certificate, I believe. BSEN 62606 is the correct standard for the ARC fault function. And if we look at my test rig, which has the 2-module device, a schedule of test results for this configuration would have 61009 for the circuit overcurrent and earth leakage protection in the first circuit way, and 62606 for the attached AFDD in the neighbouring circuit way. So there are instances where 62606 would be valid if the schedule is laid out the way I do it. And no, Easycert doesn't yet have 62606 in their drop-downs of codes, just like they're missing 61643-11 for my SPD, as seen in the last video. But to be fair to them, the schedule is specifically asking for the BSEN number of the overcurrent device, as I said a moment ago. And that's perhaps why Amendment 2 is making the daft proposal for a second BSEN column. But as I stated last time, lay out the schedule to match the circuit ways, open up the existing BSEN column to match the device populating the circuit way, rather than specifically listing it only as the overcurrent standard, and you have a form more fit for purpose without overcrowding and complicating it by adding in new columns. Easy. Even the geniuses at the IET should be able to see that, you'd think. In the last video, I railed against the lack of an undo function in Easycert, which is especially bothersome when coupled with the F12 schedule sabotage soft key that, when pressed, nukes all empty spaces with a not applicable. It makes filling out a large schedule much like playing a game of Minesweeper, because on laptop keyboards F12 is usually near the 0 key, and a lot of zeros appear in the test data being tabulated. One miss it and boom! There were comments that a lack of an undo function in a Windows application is just bad programming, which is fair enough. I can't think of any of the programs on my laptop where I can't undo at least the last keystroke. I'm no programmer myself, of course, but again, this is Tysoft's business, and they've kind of got one job. Others inform me of having been caught out in the same way. Why is the F12 key mapping even a thing? Fucking lose it in the next update, Tysoft. It should never have been programmed in the first fucking place. Still, the good news is there are workarounds. Richard Price mentioned going into the BIOS of my ThinkPad and changing the operation of the function key so that the function buttons, rather than the F keys, were enabled by default. Something that is the case on my HP laptop. Sadly, that didn't work on my ThinkPad, the only BIOS option being to set a function lock. However, when enabled, it prevents all non-function keys from working at all. Still, my thanks goes to Twitter user Alternate Zone, who, while not being the first to propose a keyboard remapping app such as AutoHotkey, was the first to script and package it for a lazy sod like me, who would never have gotten around to it otherwise. Now one simply needs to run the script when the ThinkPad is started, and if the F12 is nudged while Easycert is running, then a confirmation box appears, checking whether I really do want to ruin my carefully prepared schedule or not. I've put this onto my website, link in the description, so you too can have this functionality, which Tysoft really should have pulled their heads out of their arses to code into Easycert in the first place, considering how damaging F12 can be when you're balls deep into compiling paperwork out on site. I don't have time in my day to be unfucking something Tysoft must surely have had prior negative user feedback on over the years. Jake Rowe, like me, bemoans the lack of a ZSDB for domestic schedules. Why is that omitted? It's on the fucking model form. But yeah, domestic installations only ever have one consume unit, as we all know. Tysoft base their forms on NIC EICs, so that's where that dickishness comes from, as Tysoft themselves told me 4 years ago when I originally queried it. Unrelated to my last video, it was interesting that Electroform, one of the web-based alternatives to Easycert I mentioned, said on Twitter that they were regularly asked by prospective customers if their solution could be used with purchase certificate numbers. It seems those used to buying off-the-shelf blank certs from their CPS with pre-printed unique numbers assume they need to do the same when working on an electronic solution. You do all know that you don't need to buy certificate numbers from the likes of NIC, EIC or NAPIT or whomever, yes? 644.4.202 requires certificate authenticity and integrity be verifiable, so a unique number on the top of your paperwork will demonstrate compliance with that. But as I showed, I just base my certificate numbers on the date and keep a record of their issue. You can buy certificate numbers off your CPS if you feel you really need to hand them more of your hard-earned cash than you already do, but all you actually require is your own internal process of unique numbering. Just start at 1 and count up if you want. Regarding the maximum demand figure and the multiplying by 0.4 rule of thumb, Rick Costello thinks the 0.4 factor may have come from the IET design guide, whatever that is. If so, isn't that the problem? There are so many guides, more than I can ever afford, and nestled among them are little nuggets like this. If it's true that the 0.4 figure is in an IET publication, why the fuck isn't it given in the on-site guide? The point of that thing is to collate and translate information into a form the everyday Sparky can quickly refer to. And although the on-site guide talks of demand for the design of new circuits, there's nothing about calculating it for existing installations. Quite the opposite, in fact, as it dangles design counts in Appendix A before going on to say they can't be used to determine a figure for existing installations. It also mentions a further diversity factor can be applied, but stops short of giving any additional guidance on how to go about that. Cheers, and fuck you and all. Cunning Stunt asks if you can't just quote the fuse size as a limitation. And I guess you probably could, rather than making up a number where standard sockets, lighting and cooking circuits apply. As I said, I don't give much concern to applying an accurate number to demand unless the client is asking for new loads that are likely to tank the actual demand, such as additional electric showers, EV chargers and such. Going off topic, and the embedded hobbyist noted my lockdown hairstylings, which I'm sorry to say are now worse after I asked the wife to trim my fringe from out of my eyes, and she, well, proceeded to go full Lloyd Christmas on my barnet. You know you're in trouble when the person cutting your hair quickly runs through looking shocked, apologising profusely, and then laughing within seconds of snipping the scissors. Tell UK and Kalo 101 printed out that you can stop Easycert's annoying habit of autofilling insulation resistance test results in the preferences, and indeed this is set appropriately on my install, but it doesn't stop Easycert from copying what's on the top row to subsequent rows if you haven't already taken the precaution of inserting a blank comment line at the top. Easycert isn't the only software that autofills IR numbers, but no software should be making up test data. I'm going to repeat that. No software should be making up test data. You enter your own figures and you take responsibility for them. Having the software fabricating what it assumes you're seeing on the display of your tester is...
fucking pony, bruv.
No, we're not doing that again. Jordan Chapman spotted an error on my certificate, and in fact several errors crept in. The others I caught myself after publication, which is always the way, but an erratum was provided in the video description, and any errors coming to my attention in any of my videos post-publication will be detailed there, so do always check. The fact is, the more complicated the forms become, the easier it is for errors to creep in, especially when the software is determined to autofill fields. The Amendment 2 proposal to add additional columns to the test results shitshow isn't going to provide better clarity to the paperwork. It'll have the opposite effect. Moving on, and with my electrical installation certificate now issued on 10th of January, following completion of my AFDD upgrade with the refitting of the correct main switch for my Wilex enclosure, a second certificate is required, the Building Regulations Certificate of Compliance, also known as the Part P. The Government Planning Portal has various parts with rules new builds are to comply with, and Part P is concerned with electrical installations. There are 3 reasons why I would issue a Part P certificate: because I've installed a new circuit, because I've changed a consumer unit, or because I've undertaken work in what is deemed to be a special location, such as a bathroom, sauna, pool, etc. Part P, from a standard electrical installer's point of view, only applies to dwellings, not commercial installations. Although I didn't change my enclosure, I did replace all the protective devices contained within. So for all intents and purposes, this qualifies as a replacement consumer unit, and in my previous video I certified it as such. Unlike the form filling in the last video, this one's a lot quicker. A quick look up on the address of works, and yes, this is the company's registered office address, which is all over the likes of Company's House and my own website, so no point in blurring it out here. If you want to post jiffy bags of dog shit, message me first and I'll give you Nigel's address. PO or reference for me is the unique job number I assign to everything I do. Like my certificate numbers, this used to be based on the date. These days it's generated by my job tracking software. This number doesn't appear anywhere on the final certificate, but NIC ask for it all the same. Obviously it's not a new build, so I won't tick that box, and the relevant certificate number will be the unique date-based code I assigned to the electrical certificate in the last video, 10th of the 1st, 21, certificate number 01 issued that day. Type of property is interesting, as one can select dwelling or non-dwelling, although the process only applies to dwellings for the work I do, and the following screen will have the same options whichever is selected. I've only seen the electrical side of things, but if we go to the next screen, then you can see NIC, EIC have various other schemes I'm not familiar with, which maybe require notification commercially. I just don't know, or indeed care. In the descriptors, I have a few badly worded options to choose from. I say badly worded because we have the likes of install a replacement consumer unit. Well, what if I've split the tails and installed a second consumer unit? I can tick the boxes for installation of new circuits, assuming there are such off that second CU, although they could be existing circuits that have been moved over for reasons like RCD protection or to combat overpopulation in the existing CU, but there's no way here to get across that a second CU has itself been installed. Like we saw from the missing ZS at DB field on Easycert's domestic schedule of test results, it seems NIC EIC figure dwellings only ever have one consumer unit. Actually, this isn't unique to NIC EIC, and if I look back at an old NAPIT Part P search from when I was with them on a job where I had installed a secondary CU, the wording is the same, and in this instance it seems I ticked the box for install replacement consumer unit, even though on that job the old BS 3036 box was left untouched and a modern CU was wanged next to it to serve a new extension. So it was presumably some political fuckwit in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, or whatever it was named back in the day, who came up with these descriptors, although no doubt with input you'd like to think from those with clout representing the industry, like NIC, EIC. So let's not let them off the hook entirely. Whatever, these options are largely nonsense, don't really inform local authority building control on what's been done, and none of it is checked up on, making the whole thing a mere red tape exercise. Accredited contractors do it to tick the boxes because that's the way it's supposed to work, but those who don't rarely get butt-fucked for failing to comply. It's actually the homeowner's responsibility to ensure their contractor can provide this paperwork, and if they say they can't, then the homeowner or their representative, such as a builder if a job is big enough, is supposed to be putting in a planning application for the proposed electrical work before it commences. There's nothing wrong with an electrical contractor being non-accredited if they choose to be, and that contractor can undertake work that's supposed to be under Part P if they're upfront with their client that an electrical certificate, but no Part P certificate, will be supplied upon completion. The client can choose to jump through the planning hoops or not. It's their property, their installation, their responsibility, and their arse if LABC want to be dicks about it. The problem comes with contractors who aren't accredited for Part P work undertaking such without being upfront of that sign-off paperwork being missing, as that can leave a homeowner on the hook with LABC for paperwork they assumed would be supplied. That's something I have seen, where a homeowner is getting leaned on by LABC for paperwork relating to an extension, loft conversion or whatever, because the paperwork was incomplete and the Spark who did it has now either done a runner or admitted he can't now shit out the cert. In that event, I'm not going to certify anybody else's work, but usually LABC can be placated by someone like me performing an EICR on the elements of the installation that can be physically inspected and tested, and then issuing a satisfactory verdict, if indeed one is merited. Anyway, the whole Part P thing is a nonsense, as it isn't effectively enforced, cowboys are rarely punished, homeowners don't know their responsibilities or what to look for when appointing a contractor, and LABC get paperwork that's not descriptive enough to indicate what's really been done. My ticking the box for a replacement consumer unit leads onto a page where I can confirm digital or physical delivery, and that's all there is to it. The certificate has a unique ID, NIC, EIC get a further fee from me for the submission, the client gets a certificate they'll probably never look at, and LABC get a heads up that something electrical has happened at the address. On the back we have the blurb. Details of the work have been notified to your local authority. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's not like the pencil dicks at local authority building control will ever have a clue. They're too short-staffed and underfunded to worry about my tick boxes. This certificate also supposedly gives my client the peace of mind of NIC EIC's Platinum Promise. If you believe there are any issues, please raise your concerns in the first instance with the registered installer who carried out the work. We are sure they will want to do everything possible to resolve them. That's a fucking hoot. If you are unable to resolve the issues directly, then please contact us and we will explain how the NIC EIC Platinum Promise works and how we can help. The first step in getting incorrect, bad or downright dangerous new electrical work put right is indeed to complain to the installer. That's fair enough. Personally, I've never had any complaints, but if there were such, then I would want the opportunity to attempt to redress it before any escalation, because it's my name and my reputation. The problem with these CPS warranties, and they're all the same, comes when the client's relationship with the electrician has broken down irreparably. I have some cowboy competition blogs on my website that show some of the bad installation jobs I've been called to put right, and in all such cases the reason I was called in is down to the client and electrician having fallen out. The cause of that fallout is often that the client can physically see the workmanship is not to a professional standard and they no longer trust the original installer to have the requisite skills to make good. Obviously, a customer ought to be able to expect professional quality. That's what they've appointed a professional for. So it usually comes to a head when either the customer refuses to pay for further work unless the existing is sorted to their satisfaction, in which case the Sparky might just figure it's not worth the effort and walk off. Or the customer has paid upfront and feels they haven't got value for money, something the Sparky might not agree with because they figure the work is okay and they've already put the hours in. In the cases I've been called into, I'm very much on the customer side, as the shoddy workmanship is evident. But is it fair that the client, having perhaps already paid an accredited electrician for what turned out to be a bad job, now has to pay me to make good? Well, no. But if the previous guy was too cack-handed or clueless to do it right in the first place, would you want him back in your home, now with a chip on his shoulder, to somehow up his game and make it all good? Most people figure it's not worth the grief and would rather shell out on someone with a better reputation just to get the work finished. So where do these CPS workmanship warranties come into play? Well, they don't. If you don't want the shit installer to uncock his cock-ups because the professional relationship has broken down and you're perhaps even intimidated by having some surly installer back in your home supposedly to put right what shouldn't have been wrong in the first place, then the CPS warranty can't help you. There's no compensation scheme, no apology required, no alternative member paid to put right, and no consequences for the original installer. At least, not from my experience. And my experience was to directly shop a NAPIT member for poor workmanship and fraudulent representation in 2016, which went nowhere and saw that NAPIT member retain his membership. And that's the reason why I left NAPIT in 2016. I didn't see why I should be flying their flag when I, as a member, couldn't call attention to the dangers of another member. But all CPS warranties are the same. If you've no confidence in your installer's ability to make good, then the warranty can only be called on if the work was notified and the installer is no longer in business to address the complaint. That whole sorry tale is linked to in the description for those who like a long read. The industry holds Part P in low esteem. Part pointless is what it's often referred to because it doesn't solve anything. It merely adds additional costs and paperwork to legitimate installers while doing nothing against those who ignore the rules. It's another woolly idea dreamed up by politicians lining the pockets of middlemen at the expense of the guy on the coalface. With NAPIT having acquired Stroma and NIC-EIC retiring the Alexa brand in the forthcoming spring, the choice of electrical competent person scheme is thinning out. It makes sense to be a member of one if undertaking a lot of domestic work where you want to provide a fully compliant and legitimate service, but the Part P process isn't fit for purpose and probably never will be.